So my name is Randy Anderson, and I'm the president of the Chautauqua Sports Hall of Fame. The mission of our organization is to honor and preserve the sports history of Chautauqua County. I'm going to ask you to come up. Come on, Fred, come on up, and let's talk about the Pennyroyal Racetrack, where Bill Rexford and Lloyd Moore got their starts.
I have to understand, that was 1946, and I was 5 years old. So most of my stories are like getting the pants scared off of you most of the time. These guys with these roaring motors and the dust and everything else. My father was Howard Milliman, working at Rexford's garage in Chautauqua Valley, and his fellow mechanic was Al Bush from over that way, and they built Bill Rexford's first car, which you can find in that picture, which is in some of these places. They built his first car, and of course us kids were there watching that whole process take place, not understanding at all about what they're going to do with this thing once they get it, about the racing. But as it went on, we learned more and more about it, and it was pretty exciting to be that close to that. Now, my dad was Bill's mechanic, so he was allowed, of course he was inside the track at the Pennyroyal, and so he could take his family inside the track. I was inside the track, right next to these cars, right next to these drivers, right, you know, I mean, it was just like just a beautiful world to be in, with all the noise, the dust, and everything else. I had some interesting experiences from all of that, but for the most part, it was where they got started. If you're not familiar with the Pennyroyal, it was a horse track at one time. It's on the corner of Downhill and Eldridge Road. It's an Amish farm. If you know what to look for, you can see it's a very big flat field. And if you stand on Town Line Road and look at it, you can see a little rise in turn 1, which comes up very close to the road. Little rise in turn 2, where they kept throwing the dirt out there. And it was a half-mile track, which made it different than any other tracks in the area because they were all quarter of a mile, third of a mile even. But if you really wanted to go fast, that's where you went, was the Pennyroyal. And the thing of it was that these cars were not designed to go the speeds that these guys were going, which were, you know, 60 miles an hour down a dirt road with a turn at the end of it. And it was brand new, that part of it. So the rest of the cars who were racing to these other race cars, they wanted to come up there on Sunday and get in on that track and really make the dirt fly and make the dust fly and everything else. And I got to sit across the table from Bill Rexford when he was taking eye cups that my mother was filling for him and putting him on his eyes and dumping them, and my mother was filling them as fast as they could, because a lot of these cars had come from, you know, through the Second World War. They were really in good shape, but they put knobby tires on them. Well, knobby tires throw stones, and stones would, number one, take out your windshield, and that would be gone after a couple laps. And then you'd have your goggles on, and you'd be trying to protect the rest of your face from the stones flying into the car, and the next thing you know, your goggles were gone, and he would be racing like this, trying to, and you know, trying to stop. And of course, it was just dust, dust, dust. I've got some pictures of that you can see, and you can see it was dusty, and it was if the wind wasn't in the right direction, blowing that off the track, that was a nasty place to be. But what a thrill it was for a kid to be that close to all of that noise, and the pictures that I have back there and up here are taken at that particular time. Anything else you've always wondered about that I might know about being around it? I wasn't there very long because as Bill started to make his trek down south, my dad started out as his mechanic and he wanted him to go with him. So he did. But he was coming home to a job in Chautauqua Valley at 5 o'clock in the morning, 6 o'clock in the morning, and coming back from God knows where they were racing. And so anyway, the moral of that story was, my mother finally said to him, "You got a choice to make here. You've got a wife and 4 kids at home, or you can go on the road with that damn car." Make your choice. And my dad, no problem, I'm walking away from the car. And he did. He would work on it when they brought it back. He would work on it when if the cars were close. But Canfield, you know, and all the rest of the tracks that they were racing to, he said, no, gotta get somebody else. But it was, I mean, it was just, what a thrill to be that close to those cars when they would fire them up, you know. And you're a little 5, 6, 7, 8, 9-year-old boy, and that was a thrill for me, and it always has been. And I am just delighted to see this done for Bill Rexford, because he was a hero to me, a bigger hero to my brothers who were both mechanics, and to my father who was a mechanic too. So I can tell you what it was like, but I'll do the best I can. Yeah.
How long did Pennyroyal survive?
Pennyroyal started in '46, and by 1960, these other tracks were paying more money. They were still racing on smaller tracks, but there were bigger tracks available, much more fancy, and they were paying more price. I mean, Pennyroyal was still at $25 for first place. And that's where they started at, and that was pretty much what they finished at, was $25 for first place.
What was the attendance like at Pennyroyal?
Oh, there's a picture there on one of those 2 boards that shows you what it was like. I mean, that side hill that overlooks the track was as full as you could get it with cars and people. It was really, it was the place to be on Sunday afternoon.
I'll jump in and tell you a quick story. It kind of goes to your question. When my father and mother were dating in 1948, my dad had a Ford convertible. And he took my mom to the races at Pennyroyal, because it was a big deal. Going to the races at Pennyroyal. So, you know, they packed a picnic lunch, they got the top down, they go out to the Pennyroyal, park the car, watch the race, go back to the car, full of dirt, full, just full. Shouldn't have left the top down. Lloyd Moore told me that it was so dusty that he couldn't really see even where the track was. He just kind of kept his eye on where the trees were and tried to keep the car in between the trees, so to speak.
Well, they were, out of turn 1 was out by the road, turn 2 you were going away from the road, but you're going down the line and there's woods on the right-hand side. And the woods were close enough to the track where a lot of times the trees would be almost overhanging the track. And these guys are driving, looking at trees, waiting for the one to go left. That's what they were doing. They were in a cloud, you couldn't see a thing. They said, you just waited until you saw that one tree go left and hope that you didn't do it too soon. Or you hope, even worse, was doing it too late. If you missed your tree, the track on the other end kind of went up in the air. And when you left the track there, you were airborne for quite a ways before you could get stopped. And going towards the road was, usually that was better because it was out in the open, and if there was any kind of breeze, it would just enough, move the air just enough so you could get some good idea of where you're going, and you could also see the track. But most of the time you couldn't see the track, so you just couldn't see the road. And so you're looking for landmarks all the time that you're going down there 60 miles an hour.
So they never put water on the tracks like they do now?
Well, they did, but those knobby tires took a layer off.
They race during the day,
Yeah.
Sunday afternoons, sun's out,
Yeah,
you know,
it just-
the water didn't stand a chance.
And it was over in a hurry. And then it really got to be fun because, you know, the spectators were up there, the cars were disappearing with cloud. They come out to the turn, and you're looking to see who's leading, or if they're still going, or if they're upside down over there sometimes. But,
Someone asked a question about what happened to Penny Royal, why did it go out of business and so on. And Fred correctly answered that it was other racetracks. Well, primarily it was State Line Speedway.
Yes.
At one time, I think Greg and Randy and I researched that there were maybe a dozen racetracks in Chautauqua County, especially in the late 50s. Almost every little community in our county had a nearby racetrack. But State Line put them all out of business. Why? It was a nicer facility. They paid a lot more money. They were paying $200 to $300 to win. Fred just talked about 25 bucks, which was pretty common back then.
imagine what third place was.
They were also, State Line was racing late model cars. In 1956, they were racing 56 cars. In 57, they were racing 50. So it was modern cars. Everybody got tired of watching the jalopies running around these other tracks. They wanted to go see the fast late models at State Line. State Line had lights. They could race at night, so they didn't have to deal with the dust problem during the day. State Line just put everybody else out of business, and State Line's still going all these years later. So they must be doing something right up on the hill.
Well, I'll tell you a Rexford story, but I'll start out by saying that they practiced during the week, and in the evening, they would start dragging them in, and they would go out and practice on the track, practice. So, and then they'd come back in and they, well, what else can we do? What else can we do to make it faster? Well, you know, the tires are going up and down because it's bumpy, so they chain around that, they chain that down to the body. And the thing they didn't realize when they first started out was staying in the seat is important. To keep moving fast. You know? And so they get out there and they start racing and they start jiggling sideways, fall off the seat, because they usually put just one seat in there, of course. If they left the other one in, then you were up over the other door and still had your foot on the gas in one hand. And anyway, so they decided, well, we'll put seat belts on. Okay, what works good is a seat belt. Hay rope. Put a hole in the floor here, run the rope underneath, bring it up, tie it up, secure it. Well, when you're going around corners and jiggling everything else, that rope doesn't work. Okay, back to the drawing boards. Chain, log chain. Yeah, try that. Put a log chain across your, you know, right here, and get out there. About that time, you got black and blue right across here, and no desire to go back to racing for a while. Okay, what do you do after that? Well, they found out that the Army, there was tons of those Army belts, you know, that they hung their canteens on and everything else, tons of them. Put one of those on, and you bolted it down. You got, of course, you got to bolt it from, you got to cut it in half, bolt it from here, and lock it up. That worked really good, you know, that kept you in the seat. But still, somehow you had to hook that left foot. So I took the left side door off, and you hook the left foot out, and you go strictly with your right foot. And that was, it kept coming up with these things, coming up with ways of doing it. But the big one was the very first year, we had an accident. And they had cut by then they had cut the cars down so there was just about nothing there, you know. They had taken the fenders off because if you got a jammed fender, which was apt to happen sometimes, your car would get up against the tire, and you'd be out of the race for the rest of the day until you could get home and cut the, so they just cut material off, and you can see it in the pictures. They just kept cutting it off, cutting it off, cutting it off, and that was good. It just kept getting lighter and lighter and lighter. That was a good thing. They kept getting lighter. The hoods came off, then they cut the tops off. More weight, get it off there. They cut the tops off, and a fella rolled his car over, and he didn't have a roll bar on it, because nobody had roll bars at that time. It was the first year, you know. And he got his head crushed, and so that really sent a shiver through. That almost brought the penny roll to a halt when that happened. But the guys went home and they said, well, they have roll bars on the big cars, you know. Roll bars had been invented, so they came up with an idea for roll bars. They had roll bars made out of everything that you possibly could ask for. But it would keep you from flopping right over and having a car on top of you. So that was one of the big things that they did. They had different ideas for that. But that was the reason for practicing. Well, so my dad loaded the kids up, loaded mom up. We went up to the track. He worked on the cars, and us kids played with all the rest of the kids, which was about 1,000 of them, with all the people that showed up there to practice. And so that's what we were doing. And of course, the fathers were out racing, and so it was a great place to be. In the evening, out there watching these guys doing everything they can do.
Thank you, Fred, appreciate it. I'm going to put one more guy on the spot tonight, and then we'll wrap it up. Bill's son, Dennis, is here tonight. Dennis lives in California and came here tonight. He says just to see this, but I can't believe that. Anyway, Dennis was born in 1957. Bill's racing career was over. So all he's got is his dad's stories. And I'm going to ask Dennis to just come up here and stand next to me. And Dennis, tell me one story that your dad told you as a young boy. Dennis Rexford right here.
Where were you going? Yeah, like he said, I was born in '57. Dad was out of racing at that point. I gotta admit to you, a lot of the stories that I heard when we started the trucking business, we were on the road together, and that's when I got a lot of the stories because I was old enough to really appreciate it. And most of them I can't repeat in mixed company. Those guys back then were hard drinkers and drivers, and you know I don't know anything about Lloyd Moore. I'm not putting him in this group, but you know those guys they were a rough, tough bunch, and it was the one with the most guts or the drunkest sometimes that won the race because that's all they had. And Dad always commented, in the later years, like with Richard Petty, those guys were they were athletes. And he said, if I tried to race in these days, it wouldn't work because, I wasn't in the kind of shape that they are. So he always really appreciated the fact that those guys were such good athletes. But yeah, I don't know what else to say. But yeah, Dad. He really appreciated that time in his life, but he, by the time I was old enough to really understand what was going on, he was behind it. So he didn't really talk about it a lot, and I didn't really understand. I grew up in Arizona. That wasn't really NASCAR country, so I didn't really understand the appeal anyway. So.
Dennis, did he talk at all about 1950? About the championship, did that come up?
Of course.
Yeah.
Especially like you said, when Jeff Gordon won that year, oh man, that was ugly. There was a lot of people that were really mad about that. That Jeff wasn't gonna be the youngest champion. And there was a lot of articles out about that too. And that's, you know, you talked about the asterisk. Back then, there was an asterisk next to my dad's name for the championship. And, you know, like, he had said, my dad's opinion was because he was a Yankee. You know, but, you know, who's to say for sure? But back then, that was his belief, at least. And then when I just found out tonight that about the fight over the fine. So that even kind of even proves that even more. You know, if there was that much animosity between him and Bill France. You know, well, his grandson's the president now, so. You know, I don't know for sure, but he could have said, you know, hey, whatever you do, make sure he don't get in. You know, I don't know, but that's just. But that was always Dad's opinion, was that it was because he was a Yankee.
Did Dad have any stories about moonshining or?
No, because he was a Yankee. He wasn't in that part of it. And obviously, that's how NASCAR started. And I think that might have been part of the problem too, because he was a Yankee. He wasn't a moonshiner. He wasn't, but he still came down and won. And that was only the second year that they had the championship too. And that was a Southern sport back in those days. And you know, this guy from somewhere up there won our championship. You know, that's,
he showed the moonshiners how to drive.
right. But one thing I can say about Dad was, because the race he won was a 500-mile race, and he always told me that, you know, I didn't necessarily want to finish the race. I needed to finish. You have to finish to win. So he said, make sure you finish, because there was one time I raced a motorcycle and blah, blah, blah. But that's what he told me. That was his advice. You know, finish. If you don't finish, you're not going to win. So it makes sense to me that the longer races were the ones that he would win, because, you know, he would take it easy and make sure that he finished the race, and, you know, he'd finish top 10 or win.
That's what they say in NASCAR nowadays, is you have to finish, in order to finish first, you have to first finish.
Right, yeah. And the biggest problem he said about the cars back then were the tires. So you had to protect your tires.
Yep.
So that, you know, they didn't have pit stops where you could change them out, you know, every
Right.
100 laps or whatever like they do now, especially not in, you know, 20 seconds or however fast you go. But, so that was the other reason why he said you need to finish, but you also got to be easy on your tires, because, you know, if you ruin your tires, you're done. Because, you know, the pit stops takes a long too.
Did they go the whole 500 miles on a set of tires, or did they?
I don't know, I wasn't there, but that's my assumption. You know?
The one he raced was the one he won was a dirt track. It's possible they could have gone the whole way, but on the asphalt tracks, they would have had to change that. Very first Daytona 500, the guy that won it, not Daytona 500, Darlington, Southern 500, the very first one was in 1950. The guy who won it was a guy named Johnny Mance, and he brought truck tires. He had truck tires on his car because they were several ply thick. Meanwhile, the guys that just had regular street tires or whatever, they were out in the parking lot taking tires off cars to try to get more tires for the race cars. And the big crews were out in the parking lots stealing tires off the cars to keep the race cars going. But this Johnny Mance used these several ply truck tires, and that helped him win that very first Southern 500.
Wow.
How do you do that?
Pardon me?
How do you do that fuel? I mean, how do they?
Well, they would have had to stop the fuel. Yeah, you couldn't have gone 500 miles.
And they were full-size
You're
gas
absolutely
tanks.
right.
They were full-size gas tanks too, so, because they were stock cars. And the other thing that I did want to mention was the story you told when I was here a few years ago at the Museum there in Lynn. You know, the reason why they were worried about that they had safety equipment wasn't because it had nothing to do with safety. You know, they just wanted to stay behind the wheel. And that just blows my mind that, the reason they invented seatbelts was because that's the only way they could stay behind the wheel going around the corner. You know, well, let's try a rope. No, I didn't. Or let's try. That just,
Your dad never had a racing suit?
No.
Yeah, you raced in a t-shirt and jeans. Yeah.
And that helmet he was wearing, I actually used for a motorcycle helmet when I got my first motorbike. And I crashed and dented it.
I know that he not only practiced where you were talking about, all the roads around. And my mother rode with them, several times. I think she was probably kissed around when she got home.
That sounds like that.
Who was your mother?
Who was your mother?
Who was your mother?
Who's your mother?
Carol Everett. My dad, Rex Everett, is a first cousin of Bill's. And he's here, my Aunt Linda. She's the first cousin too. I remember you when you were a little boy. And I was a little girl, so I hadn't seen you for a long, long time.
I've lost touch with my New York family, and that's a shame. But that's part of the reason I'm here. Because I'm older now, I'm retired, and I want to get back to my roots, so to speak, as much as I can.
I think it would be proper if any of the Rexford family that are here should stand up and be recognized.
I'd like to take a picture with all of them.
There's a bunch of us here from different sides of the family, and I think it'd be appropriate that we get recognized and stand up and be.
Stand up. If you're a Rexford or you want to be a Rexford, stand up. Thank you, Dennis. Appreciate it.
Hey, Randy, also, while you have this crowd, I wondered if anybody here, I think you probably are a couple, who actually drove someplace in one of those, I'm just curious whether there's any drivers here who drove on any of the tracks that were around. Anybody?
I don't think so.
I did once, but it wasn't a race, it was just Rusty Wallace racing experience, and I tore the track up.
And that's why you're still in Ellington tonight. This gentleman here, Rex, he said he was at the 19th, come on Rex, stand up here with me, pal. He said that he went, he's a cousin of Bill's. Come on up here in the front so everybody can see.
I gotta see you, I gotta see
you.
you.
Come on, Ronnie, come on. And he said that he went to the 1951 Southern 500. That's the second one ever in Darlington, South Carolina. Wonder if you could tell what that experience was like.
Well, it was awful hot that day. I had a t-shirt on and I got burned the worst I ever have. And the cars were popping tires on that track. And they started, I don't know how many cars, but they started about 60 cars, I think.
3 wide.
Yeah.
3 wide.
And I never saw so many, but the fastest so many cars, and they let one of every make enter the race. So a lot of those cars didn't last very long, but
What did it cost to go to the races back then, Rex? What did you pay to get in?
I have no idea.
You still have a ticket stub in your back pocket? Oh yeah, you never paid, right? How did Bill do that day? Do you remember?
No, but I remember there was 3 of them. I think Jim Feeblecorn raced.
From Randolph?
Randolph, yeah, and Lloyd
And Bill. Okay, 3 people from our region.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you so much, Rex.
Very nice.
Well, I think that's it. Oh, wait, no, you should come up too. Let this lady have a chance. Come on up.
I just want to say that, you
Get up here.
know,
Don't start talking till you get in the front of the camera.
listen, we got to get Bill into the Shooting Hall of Fame. And I have made up little tickets of to whom you should write. And we don't have to say, I mean, there's not a lot to say, but he's the only champion in the whole bunch of them that's not in their own Hall of Fame, and that is so not right. So if you're interested in being part of the grassroots movement to get him in, please take one of those and just write some kind of a little note like, I think Bill Rexford should be in the Hall of Fame, please vote him, whatever.
The second year of NASCAR's new series, then called Strictly Stock, was preparing to open. Car owner Julian Busink walked into a dealership and drove out with the 1950 Oldsmobile that Bill Rexford would drive to one win and the championship. Rexford's record as the youngest Winston Cup champion still stands. Bill Rexford remains the youngest champion in Winston Cup history. Rexford was only 21 when he won the 1950 title. He was known for his consistency. He won only one race, but captured the Stock Car National Championship. In another bizarre turn, it would be the only victory of Rexford's career. The championship came down to the last race, with Rexford beating Fireball Roberts by a slim margin.